Hey, Guoba here with a video that will probably get some people hating. We are going to be comparing the 7 5-star standard units in Star Rail today. You should be around 200 out of 300 for your free 5-star selector. That is unless you've been spending a jade or two. So in this video I'll be going through what makes each standard unit so strong, as well as their major weaknesses, to help anyone that is curious, or anyone that is preparing to make their standard selector decision. And honestly, these units' values have changed a lot already due to unit releases, so we will rank them on their power now as well as their power for new players. Finally, to preface, I am a design over meta type guy, and you can choose whoever you want. This is just for discussion with the community. If you have any different opinions, let me know below, and if you plan on choosing someone from the selector, let me know too. If you like this video, maybe consider subscribing, but now let's get on with the video. So we will be going through alphabetically and starting with Bailu. I haven't got a guide out on her yet, but I will get around to it, and she's pretty simple. In 1.0 she was a massive deal due to us only having Natasha as our other healer. If you wanted to push Memory of Chaos, you ideally wanted 2 healers, or you needed Gepard, or you had a very well invested team with something like FireMC and March. We now have Luocha, as well as better relics, and we will soon have Fushuan and Lynx, so her value is decreasing every patch. Of course she still brings her own unique abilities, and is a strong, albeit RNG healer. She has great healing multipliers, better or equal to Natasha's, all with a higher base HP, and an off-fielding healing trigger that just allows for more healing in general on top of damage reduction. So she is all in all potent for the main role of abundance, which is keeping your team alive. Healing is essential in turn-based games without evasion, and you already know that if you've ever played Ting Yuan. Her invigoration allows for some safety, whereas outside Natasha's ultimate, Natasha doesn't have any off-turn healing that can save you during enemies' hits. She of course has continuous healing effects though during ally turns. On top of that, Bailu has a revive that allows you to cheat death once a battle and be even safer when fighting, and this doesn't lose you a Memory of Chaos starter. What Natasha does have, unlike Bailu though, is a cleanse, which is a tool very essential in Star Rail. We don't have too many cleanses right now, and Bailu not having one means she feels really weak from the get-go. Luocha has one that can automatically happen with no skill point usage. Natasha has one, and Lynx even has an AoE one. Bailu has heals, and that's what you expect from a healer, but her bonus utility doesn't look all that great. What also annoys me is that Bailu's healing is RNG. On someone like Blade who wants a lot of healing power, that skill missing him is pretty upsetting. Finally, her Eidolons don't scale her that well, they're all kind of a bit weird. So Bailu's value right now is her solo sustain power. She can do so whilst being skill point positive, which is always going to be nice to have. Though with Luocha out, Natasha being free, and Fushuan and Lynx out soon, I don't think she will be necessary anymore. So I will be rating her pretty low, and one of the least needed 5 stars to pick up. For newcomers though, she is excellent and will carry your teams. Her element and solo sustain power does mean she can still be used in Mono Lightning, but her position elsewhere is replaceable. Next up is arguably the best standard 5-star Bronya. We all know how strong she is, we all know that thousands re-rolled for her. Let's go into detail what makes her, in my opinion, the best standard unit to get. So Bronya doesn't do extraordinary damage, she doesn't heal the team, she doesn't shield the team. She instead allows the teammates that do these things to do them so much more, along with buffing capabilities that are just ridiculous. She has a mechanic that defies the meaning of turn-based games. Just like Zila's Resurgence and E2 in Bailu Lune can let these units take another turn almost immediately, Bronya's skill does the same, but to any unit you want. Now that's already pretty powerful, even pretty broken. Giving DPS twice the effective turns as long as you have skill points to upkeep the damage means double the damage. And the fact that at level 10 this skill gives a 66% damage boost, stronger than Ting Yuan's whole ultimate's damage percent boost, is just insane. The cleanse on top just makes it even sweeter. And all of that is just her skill. Her ultimate is an AoE giant buff and means one hypercarry gets giga buffed, but any multi DPS comps gets buffed like crazy too. Finally, her talent is a big pro for her. She has an inbuilt advancement forward on basic attacks, meaning she can generate skill points a ton while setting up for better skills at the same time. Being a Harmony also lets her hold insane light cones, including her own for 96% damage boost per skill. She is just insane and her Eidolons scale her so well. I'd say her downside is the tricky speed stuff she can get up to, but it's also fun to work around. There's fast Bronya and slow Bronya that my video addressed, and there's a lot of weird things that can happen like crowd control that make it so her skill's advancement forward is not that powerful. That's why I enjoy effect resistance stacking on her over needlessly stacking more crit damage on substats. 3.9 effect resistance from a substat is much more valuable than 0.9 ally crit damage per ultimate from a crit damage substat. Nonetheless, the skill's power, regardless of how much action value you advance forward, is still crazy, and all in all is one of the best abilities in the game, solidifying her as the best standard 5-star. Even if her damage buffs, attack buffs, crit damage buffs all get powercrept, her push forward makes her pretty much future-proof. And even if another unit does that as well, remember you need 2 teams for Memory of Chaos. Now onto Clara, the counter-attacking beast of a DPS that boasts great defensive power on top. She provides a DPS role as well as an off-tank role and aggroes enemies, which can allow for dual DPS comps. But her hyper carry potential is massive too, and so far all new support releases have benefited her greatly. For current players, DPS units shouldn't be too much of a priority to grab, but Clara is a bit different in this regard. Whereas Yanqing and Himeko require skill points to do massive damage and have their own issues, Clara is just solid on top of not needing skill points. Arlan is skill point neutral. Blade uses 0.25 skill points a turn. Clara can be skill point positive for the team and still dish out big tons of damage. The only downside of course is that it's RNG. She has a low damage floor, but a high damage ceiling. There's a reason she was dealing the most damage at E6 for AoE on Friday before, is because she is so tricky to calculate. There are aggro calculations of course, but that's all an average, and if enemies don't hit you, then you lose out a lot. This is mitigated with her ultimate, as well as March, but March is a bit of an anti-synergy at the same time. Links however will give aggro without freezing enemies, and may enable Clara's high damage ceiling to be more easily obtained, we will have to see. As destruction units often have hybrid damage capabilities, Clara has nice AoE on top of her single target. Her skill is fully AoE, and her enhanced counters are blast attacks, so Clara can really do it all if she gets hit. Well, Svara can at least. And getting hit isn't too much of a problem either. She has high defensive stats, we have excellent ways of sustaining her, and she has innate damage reduction. Her Eidolons scale her greatly too, with her E6 being incredible. I rate her above Himeko and Yanqing, and her power is great for both newcomers and current players. We now have Gepard Landau, Star Rail's beefiest boy. A lot of the community did a coin flip on release because he was considered garbage and is now known to be a solo sustained powerhouse. Just like Bailu, he can be skill point positive, but his shields are safety nets stronger than revives. As long as you can keep it up, he will provide your team with all the defense they need, and unlike healing, these shields will protect you from one-shots. So Gepard's power comes from his ultimate. It has 100 energy cost and gives the tankiest shields you've seen, and we won't get stronger shields than these for a long time. Even Fu Xuan won't be impeding on his shielding power, as she is based around damage mitigation and damage transferring. On top of his defense being the highest in the game, his shield multipliers are massive, meaning 3k shields are possible and 2k shields are easy to get. Enemies killing you through these shields are rare, but what's rare too is enemies even hitting your allies. He has innate aggro increase, and his 2 signature light cones provide aggro increases too. So even if your shields are down on allies, you can still help your team out. If he ever gets chunked down somehow, he even has his own self-revive. All in all, he's a beefy unit and is literally needed for Arlan and Yanqing's full potential too. Bailu is similar as she's ideally wanted for mono lightning, but not as needed as Gepard for these 2 units. Having a shield to prevent damage will be useful for any future unit that can't get hit. His skill unfortunately is a bit useless due to the base chance, but can become clutch in some scenarios, especially with his E1. But you'll be spamming basics mostly. This means like Bailu, he is a skill point positive solo sustain, and that is amazing. His shield uptime is permanent with enough hits and an NG rope, and Gepard's build needs aren't too bad. The downside though is that his shield uptime depends on hits, so sometimes your team may be without a shield for a turn, and with no healer normally on a team with Gepard, this can be rough. Furthermore, he wants speed to keep up with his allies to shield them before enemies take turns, and unfortunately he is the second lowest speed in the game. Unlike Luocha who can run speed sets, Gepard really wants that 1.2 times shield multiplier from the Knight of Purity Palace set. On top of needing speed for uptime, this means any allies that take a lot of turns will naturally get rid of Gepard's shield and be very vulnerable, so healing in these scenarios is better. Finally, his Eidolons kinda suck, outside of his awesome E4 and potentially clutch E1. I do consider him slightly better than Bailu because of the massive shield roll. Every abundance can heal, but no one provides the shields he does just yet. The aggro on top is excellent too. He will see less use with Fu Xuan out on top of Luocha being out, but Mono Ice of course still keeps him usable, just like Mono Lightning for Bailu, and he has other niche uses. Now for Himeko, maybe the most memed unit alongside Jingyuan, but they both of course get way too much hate. She is a fan favorite from Honkai Impact, and so naturally players want her to be strong so they can use her and reminisce. She is a 5 DPS, and with only Hook as competition and Topaz being a hunt unit, she fills in an AoE fire niche that is honestly quite nice. Of course, Fire MC can provide a ton of damage on ads with break effect, but Himeko is just better and will deal with chunky enemies unlike Fire MC. For this alone, Himeko does have a use in fire content. The problem with Himeko is her damage isn't too great at low investment. At high investment, she does surprise some people, but her true power is locked behind her talent. If you're not breaking consistently, she loses a chunk of damage. However, if you do get these follow-ups, and even without, her AoE damage is substantial. She has 2 ways of dealing AoE damage, so if we start getting more enemies with over 3 targets, AoE will take over blast attacks. Furthermore, AoE damage is incredible for fast MOC clears, and is why Erudition is skewed on 0 cycle clears. She also has a dimension-based technique like Welt, which means every wave will suffer her technique's power, which is actually a strong vulnerability debuff. People's major problems are her talent procs and her single target damage, but with enough supports to buffer, the latter point is irrelevant. The talent procs are annoying at times and heavily rely on matching elements. If you do match elements very well, you'll get a lot of mileage out of it. And an unwritten aspect of her talent is that elites and bosses grant her 3 stacks. With that knowledge, her talent is actually online quite often. It does have the usual problem though of follow-ups where it may happen when you least want it. Another problem is her burns are way too low in base chance and damage to matter, and that locks some of her damage down, whereas Clara just gets an unconditional 30% damage boost to counters. Finally, her Eidolons are pretty weak. So I rate her low for players. Her fight aspect is great and her damage is much better than people say, but more and more DPS are coming out with numbers high enough to brute force the wrong elements. Also, these enemies have 3 weaknesses, it's not just fire. If enemies with high damage resistances come out and elements are even more needed, then Himeko becomes nicer to have. AoE of course is great too, so I rate her above Yanqing. For newer players too, having a strong starter DPS like Himeko is nice, and she is really great for farming, which honestly is nice to have. Now on to Welt. I initially made a guide for him, but I will be updating it and do a better and full video soon, and I can't wait for it. He is such a cool unit, and I hope standard blesses me with him soon. I might just have to choose him from my selector. He is a solid DPS combined with a very strong controller. He reduces speed so much, pushes enemies back a ton, and even has some damage amp. He's an IHT unit too, meaning he can provide even more damage amp if you want. His core identity is his speed reduction and imprisonment. Combined together, the enemy can't move very fast and is pretty much sent to the Middle Ages. Furthermore, it can be AoE. His skill is a bounce, reducing speed, and his ultimate is AoE and will be imprisoning enemies. A side effect of the imprisonment debuff is that it also reduces speed. This stacks with his skill slow for a lot of fun. He also stacks with his techniques imprison, which is a dimension technique and will be hitting all enemies on a new wave. And finally, it stacks with break effect imprisons. Basically, Welt ensures enemies that aren't imprison or CC resistant won't be taking a turn before they die. And they'll be dying to his strong damage multipliers too, combined with his debuffs that activate one of the strongest relic sets in the game. Part of his damage is locked behind slows, but he has a lot of ways to ensure the enemies are slowed. And if all of his skill lands on an enemy, it's a seriously strong multiplier, as powerful as Hunt ultimates. He doesn't have their large self buffs though, so you can't compare too much. What makes his imprisonment so much more useful though than just a pushback and a slow is that it cancels enemies' actions. If the boss is about to unleash a powerful strike, Welt can ultimate them and prevent it if the imprisonment lands. So he's a DPS, a debuffer, a damage amper, and a survivability tool. He's a jack of all trades. If he could heal, it would be even better. Another thing is that he benefits a niche very well. Teams that want enemies' weakness broken will love Welt. E1 Crit Su Shang loves Welt. Teams with little survivability love Welt. His slows, pushback, and or break cement him as the premier enemy controller unit, and I doubt that will change for a long while. Finally, for positives, his Eidolons scale him very well, E2 and E6 being incredible. One problem he does have is effect hit rate. This is solved in some ways, but in general you want effect hit rate to ensure your imprisonment, without foregoing crit stats. His slow pre-E4 is hard to hit despite the bounces too. This is another problem when combined with debuff resistance. 9 enemies already have imprisonment resistance, and 11 have control effect resistance. That's 20 enemies where Welt's power is severely dampened, 4 especially where he can't do any imprisonments, and you might as well just run a better unit. I do rate Welt very high, just under Bronya, due to his immense debuff capabilities, and his niche that no one else fills right now. His damage is a very nice bonus, and he is a solid carry in many definitions of the term. He does struggle versus some content, but when you can bring him, which is actually quite frequent, he is an absolute beast. As a sub DPS or main DPS, Welt will be a great addition to the team. He has a lot of future-proof aspects, and a new player should love him for the survivability benefits, if not the DPS elements, which are hard to build for at the start of the game. Last but not least, we have Yanqing. He's specialized in single target damage, and his AoE is non-existent. In that single target scenario, however, his damage is very high, and he has a lot of self buffs that makes him easy to use. So Yanqing's identity is about his Soul Steel buff. It grants him decreased aggro, crit rate, crit damage, and a chance to deal follow-ups, which can freeze and do more damage. His goal is to keep it up through a Gepard shield, or great aggro play, or breaking enemies' bars with the team. He needs this buff though to do his max damage. His damage multipliers are pretty high, and combined with his massive soul buffs, his damage floor is very good. We have a 60 crit rate and 50 crit damage buff on his ultimate, total to 80 crit rate and 80 crit damage with his talent's passive. If that's not insane, I don't know what is. This does however mean that outside of his ultimate turns, his crit rate is not as high as regular carries. Stacking crit above 20 to 30 will make him overcap during his ultimate and lead to diminishing returns. What does help with this though is of course his signature, which is honestly a very underrated light cone for hunt users. If they have multi-hit attacks, which is everyone except Sushang, this can grant a great damage increase as long as you drop some initial crit rate. Finally, his Eidolons are okay, some are excellent, some are weird. His major problem outside of his talent going down is his lack of AoE. This is a problem with all hunt units so far except Sealer, kind of with her resurgence. The power of hunt characters is their power in killing bosses. My barely built Yanqing in a right team setup was one-shotting mid-Memory of Chaos bosses. The problem they have is getting there, and substituting a Harmony on a hyper carry team for an AoE damage dealer can hurt your overall damage. Perhaps we will get a DPS that buffs the team a ton one day, or a buffer that does great AoE damage. For now, you'll just have to suffer as enemies take one Yanqing turn to die. But when you do reach that boss stage, stacked with buffs and hitting those follow-ups, bosses die very nicely. His other problem is of course those follow-ups, they have 60% chance of happening, and they do contribute a lot of damage, especially with Tingyun on the team. Final problem is his 140 NG cost. It's pretty wonky to get, and it's a big part of his damage. All in all, he's a really great single target DPS, but those will be power crept. He fills the ice single target niche, great in mono ice, but with Jinglui, a destruction unit coming out in the future, she will probably just power creep him in the single target role whilst also providing AoE. I don't see where he can excel outside of non-Jinglui pullers, and even Herta is used over him in some cases due to his lack of AoE. I rate him the lowest for current players, you really won't be needing him. But for new players, just like with Himeko, a solid DPS is awesome to start with, he will carry in damage and is very easy to build. So that's my ranking of all the standard 5-star units. I personally might get a Bronya Eidolon or Welt E0. Let me know what you chose or will choose, as well as your opinion on these units. I have very popular guides on nearly all of them and the rest are coming. So if you like this discussion vid, maybe consider subscribing. But anyway, thanks to all my amazing members, thank you for watching and have a Guoba day.